Hey, what's up guys and gals? My name is Rick9G. Thank you so much for joining me today. We're going to be talking about the 1988 movie, The Blob. Now, The Blob is an original classic going back to the 50s in which Steve McQueen starred in that movie. And this is essentially a remake of it, not a sequel. I've already posted a lot on sequels, most of which I have already covered. So I want to get into this and a couple other remakes. I mean, the month is quickly approaching. So let's talk about this movie if you haven't seen it. You should really do yourself a favor and watch it. It's pretty good, it's pretty interesting, and it will hold your attention. And it is super well done. Essentially, The Blob is about a deadly entity. It's from space and it crash lands near a small town and begins to consume everything and everyone in its path. Now what's cool is that it's a blob. It's like this gel-like substance that just absorbs people into it. Now panic ensues in this town because there's a shady government scientist group that comes and tries to contain the horrific creature. All craziness ensues, as I mentioned to you, and there's some really amazing scenes. And what's great is, remember, this movie came out in 1988, and so CGI wasn't that crazy advanced. It was pretty much in its premature, or at least primitive stages, and they were able to use it sparingly, but the special effects in this movie is pretty awesome for the time. Now, for example, there's this amazing scene that if you watch it, it'll blow your mind. You'll wonder, how in the world did they do this? Now, it involves a man who is essentially partially dissolved, but still alive. Now, he doesn't have 2 legs, he doesn't have an arm, and an eye. And you're like, what in the world is going on? Like, how did they do this? Well, they thought ahead. The people who made this movie, especially the director, Chuck Russell's a genius. He actually hired a stuntman. He was a Vietnam War veteran. His name was Noble Craig, and he was an actor as well. He was a triple amputee. He lost both legs, as I mentioned, an arm and an eye serving his country. And he agreed to be in this movie and become this injured man that was, all this stuff was taken from him. His arms and legs, or his arm, legs, and eye. And it's so interesting that they made the scene so realistic because this is how the actor really is. And the scene came out amazingly good. Now, again, there's a lot of surprises in this movie, which I don't want to spoil. A lot of them, and even themes that are used by Hitchcock and a lot of the horror icons. I mean, they did a really good job. This is a really underrated movie if you haven't seen it. Now, there's an overhead shot in a phone booth where the blob attacks an actor. And it was a really, really cool shot. But the way they accomplished it was they used a small miniature phone booth. It was only about 3 foot tall. It was a model and a doll of the actor who was supposed to be in the scene. And what they used was air mortar blast. They tried shooting the blob attack in the real phone booth, and it never really worked because of those air mortars that they were trying to use. And so they decided to use miniatures, and it looks amazing if you look at this scene. This is a special effect that you should really check out. It's really convincing. Now, the leading actor, Donovan Leitch Jr., he played Paul Taylor. They made a full body cast of his body for a very complex scene where the character is underneath that crazy blob. Now, there were 50 people who were attached to him and running the show and making the movements of the blob and so forth. And so it was a pretty crazy scene. Now, the director didn't tell the actress that was acting along with him, Shawnee Smith, that the real guy, Donovan, was underneath this fake blob for the first part of the scene. She believed that it was essentially a dummy or just not really him. So when they actually filmed the scene, they were going to get a genuine reaction of shock out of her. So when they started the scene and she realized it was actually him under the fake blob and it looked so realistic to her, she screamed her lungs out, and they kept that take in, and it did so well. It was so convincing, and it was such a great scene in the movie. They even had rock salt, and they dyed it purple to create a crystallized look for the blob at the ending of the movie. I mean, these people are so smart. They're so ingenious to come up with practical ways to make really cool special effects. And this leads to the blob itself. The blob slime, the juice, what was it made out of? It was made of menthocell, which is both very slippery and a thickening ingredient for milkshakes. Now that does worry me. I do not like that this is in milkshakes, but that's what they use. And so if you ever seen a milkshake, you see how it's thick and frothy. Well, that's this chemical that's in it, and that's what they use to make the blob. In the original 50s movie, the blob is also this reddish color. And for this 80s movie, they wanted to change that reddish pink look to green. However, they decided that the original was too iconic, and they said it would make more sense to keep it red, because if you look at the beginning of the movie, the blob starts out as transparent, and as it absorbs more people, it gets red, and it represents the blood of its victims. And so, I mean, that is so awesome and so cool. It sounds so kind of ridiculous, the premise, but when you watch the movie, it works, and you're on the edge of your seat, because there are horror and thriller aspects, and aspects that will surprise you along the way. And because the movie had so many different type of these special effects that I mentioned, the hardest part of the entire film was the consistency of making the blob look very similar between scenes, because they were using different materials, different shots, miniatures, they were using certain chemicals, different actors, lights, shading, and so they wanted to make it look the same, because they are obviously creating something that doesn't exist, and they wanted it to look authentic. I think they did a great job. If you've seen this movie, let me know what you think down below. If you haven't, let me know if you may watch it. I really do recommend it. It's great. Remember, it's 80s, and so you do get that slasher feel of, you know, the teenagers in love and crazy teenagers being not responsible. But there's a seriousness and the maturity that they become more mature, more serious as the movie continues because of this crazy blob. They essentially become adults on screen, which is really cool. I don't know. It's just a great movie in my mind, and I would love to hear your thoughts on it down below. We'll see you all next time. Don't forget to always stay positive, and most importantly, be hopeful. A really big thank you to all my Diamond tier patrons: Jerry D, Stacy L, Scott R, Citizen Kane 359, Jennifer P, David D, Kevin K, Sally N, and Vito L. If you want to be on this list or receive exclusives as a great way to support the channel, visit my Patreon description below. Thank you.